Wrong scene for a second there, oopsies. Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're having a great day, drinking lots of water, staying hydrated, have eaten something at some point today. If you haven't, now's your chance to, because we're sitting back, relaxing, and reading some more scary stories off the No Sleep Reddit today. I love doing these. I'm really excited to get into it. I've missed these so much, and it's just so much fun for me, even though my voice hurts after. From reading for an hour straight, but last time we read a 4-parter, which I did not anticipate, but it was really good. So without further ado, we're gonna jump right into our first story. Let me turn off with my cute music and turn on my scary music, and we're gonna hop right in. So this first one I have pulled up is called, and before I get into this, I always forget this. As always, I will be reading the story. You're welcome to type in chat your reactions, things you want to say about it, and I will be reading them after the story so as not to interrupt the ambiance. My dog was digging in the back garden and she found a body that looked exactly like mine. By The Eagle Strikes. This is from 3 days ago. It's raining, Jessie. Come inside, I called. It wasn't the first time I'd caught my Irish setter eagerly scooping up grass and dirt with her paws, but it was certainly the first time she succeeded in uncovering something. Something horrifying. What the heck? I screamed. I locked eyes with Jessie's discovery in the ditch, a woman's corpse. My heart cascaded toward the earth, pulling my limp body in tow, and as darkness enveloped my vision, I prayed that it had been all a direful dream. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying in the wet grass, eyeing both the setting sun above and Jessie's slobbery tongue. I'm awake, I groaned, sitting up and stroking her. I just took a quick nap? Why am I? Then it all came back to me. And even in the darkening garden, which backs onto a large forest, I could see what lay in the hole. Me. I felt my chest twist and tighten as I expended all of my energy in an effort to retain consciousness. There was absolutely no denying it. The lifeless body in Jessie's ditch was an identical copy of my own, from the brunette hair to every freckle on her newly rotting face, everything but the horizontal scar on her forehead. I ran inside, whilst Jessie continued to flit between me and the dead woman who looked like me. My dog whimpered in confusion, and I joined her. But with trembling hands, I managed to pick up my phone from the kitchen counter to ring my husband. Hi, honey, he said. It's a bit late to be ringing me, isn't it? Jack, you need to come home, I shuddered. What's wrong, Sophia? He asked. I'll be home tomorrow. Please ask your boss to let you come home early, I whispered, refusing to peel my eyes from the patio doors overlooking Jessie's ditch. What's going on? Jack asked a little more urgently. Jessie found something in the garden that I can't explain over the phone. I was met with silence, a pause that filled me with inexplicable dread. It must have lasted no more than 2 seconds, but it was enough to raise every hair on my flesh, and then... You sound really worked up, darling, Jack said. I'll ask Stuart to let me drive back early. That slowed the immediate alarm bells, but it did not still them. I let Jessie inside, and the two of us curled up on the sofa, lights on and the patio curtains drawn. Though that did nothing to resolve the existential anxiety, as I knew what lay beyond them. 2 hours later, Jack returned from his business trip, and Jessie bounded into the hallway to greet him. Where's your mummy? He cooed. She okay? When my husband entered the lounge, he beamed brightly at me, a soothing smile that would usually put me at ease. What did our crazy dog find? He asked. I think I need to show you, not tell you, I said. I drew back the curtains and opened the patio doors onto our pitch-black garden. It must have been around 10 p.m. The world felt unnervingly still. The only sounds were my squelching footsteps in the grass and Jessie's nervous panting. I pulled my phone from my pocket and shone the flashlight into the ditch. But what I saw filled me with as much terror as the initial discovery. What am I supposed to see? Jack asked, sighing. The ditch was empty. No, it was right here, I whispered breathlessly. I passed out when I saw it. Jack nodded. Well, that probably explains it. You got confused and fainted. You're prone to doing that. Yes, but I don't hallucinate things. The body was still there after I regained consciousness. I huffed. Jack smiled and stroked my face. You always misremember things. Why don't you head up to bed? I'll pick up a McDonald's for us. I need some food, and you could do with a coffee. I begrudgingly agreed, watching from the bedroom window as Jack hopped in the car and went for a late-night McDonald's trip. But I didn't go to bed. Not after the house's external lights revealed something terrifyingly damning on the bumper of his BMW. Dirt. My heart was pounding as I pieced together what I could. That Jack had clearly slipped into the garden and moved the body to his car before coming inside. Why? Well, I had an inkling as to how I could find the answers about the man I thought I had known for 7 years. With Jessie closely following me, still rattled about her discovering the garden, I headed to Jack's office. It wasn't a room that he had ever forbade me from entering. However, one of his desk drawers had a lock, which had always been a point of contention in our relationship, something that Jack forever dismissed as a security measure against intruders. I didn't know how much time I had before he returned home, so I got to work. I strode through Jack's cluttered workspace, rounding the corner of the desk. Without hesitation, I proceeded to hammer away at the locked drawer with the blunt and heavy ornament. Jessie pawed at the door inquisitively, barking at the excessive noise. That's it, girl, I grunted, hammering away. Let's make it all look like an accident. You were all worked up after all. After repeatedly bludgeoning the drawer lock, the handle eventually snapped off the wood and the drawer slid open. Inside, there was nothing but a small piece of paper with the following printed words. Desktop and S folder, and then a bunch of words that I won't repeat. Passwords. Not what I'd expected to find, but I knew I had limited time before Jack returned. But there was no way I could waste the opportunity. Everything I'd known about my husband was a lie. I threw the caution to the wind, turning on the monitor and sitting at his desk chair. The password worked. As the desktop loaded, I wondered what I would find in S folder. What sordid secret was my husband keeping? I didn't want to imagine why there would be another me in a shallow grave. Cloning, time travel, my head was spinning. I searched Window File Explorer for S folder, and there was one result. A password-protected folder, and so I shakily entered the key. Inside the folder, I found neither evidence of some master cloning program nor evidence that my husband had traveled to the future and murdered me. Yes, I'm aware that my hypotheses were ludicrous, but the truth is far less believable. What did I find? Just one Word document with an obscure title. The seed process. I opened it to find diagrams and instructions for some sort of ritual. The seed process. I violently trembled at the crudely drawn diagrams, depictions of humans being lobotomized, brains in jars, roots sprouting from the pink matter. I skim-read the list of instructions, and the picture of this seemingly supernatural ritual started to form. Remove the brain, plant the seed, water the brain, and watch limbs grow. Let a new improved human flourish. Mold your loved ones in your desired image. No more resistance. I started to wail uncontrollably, and Jessie nuzzled my leg to soothe me. I could type more about what I read in the document, but recounting it in greater detail would only make me relive that sickening feeling, a horror that could not be put into words. Jack has been removing my brain, burying my corpse, and regrowing me from the brain outwards, using a seed, whatever that means. I don't know how many times he's done it. I don't know how many versions of me are buried in the garden, in the forest perhaps. Jessie likes to dig there too. But it explains so much. The blank spots in my memory, the misremembering Jack always mentions, the fact that every time I notice a red flag for my husband, I wake feeling different, refreshed, compliant. Every time he's been chipping a piece of me away, changing me, improving me. That night before he came back to the house, I took Jessie and left without a word. Is he tracking me? I hope not. Whoever me might be. A far stretch from Sophia. That much is certain, and it fills me with a deep sorrow. It also explains the unsalvageable chasm within me. Some repressed, unreachable past version of myself lies at the bottom of that well, I imagine. After all, Jack killed the real Sophia long ago. Who knows how deeply into the forest she's buried. That's the end. Read some comments here. Just a thought, though. Maybe you could have a better husband. This is heartbreaking. That man does not truly love you and you did well to leave. I'm sad your reality changed so quickly in such a horrible way. Please stay safe. Keep us posted about any new developments. Stay safe. And forgive the typos. I knew he was sus when he said the body was still there when he woke up and he didn't react like body, but just basically patted you on the head. I couldn't even imagine what was actually happening. Good luck to you. Someone says, I think it's time to plant Jack seed. Alright, let's move on to this next one. This is called A Boy in My Class Wouldn't Stop Crying. I regret asking him why. By Trash Tia from 6 days ago. It was always 8 minutes to 10 p.m. 7 minutes to 10, and I am dressed in the filthy, torn remnants of my senior prom dress. 6 minutes to 10, and I throw myself onto cool concrete and play dead for exactly 12 seconds. 12, 11, 10. I can't breathe. 9, 8, 7. When do I get up? 6, 5, 4. Now. No. Too fast. I'll be caught if I'm moving too fast. I need to slow myself down. I need to blend in with the nothing. 3, 2. Now. I linger for a moment and second guess myself. I start to wonder if someone was waiting for me to get up, but I can't take the risk of waiting. I spring to my feet, driving my achy body into a run. It takes me too long to run through town, and I can barely remember where I'm running. There's just an endless creeping shadow and the skeleton of what I used to call normality. The town diner where I spent most of my time is now a meeting place for those who are looking for me. The school has been converted into a battleground, and the clock tower is where I will die if I can't run. 10 p.m. is when it begins. It happened to my brother and sister, but it won't happen to me. I leap over a fence leading into someone's flower garden and almost slip into their pool. I hate countdowns because counting down meant 10 p.m. was getting closer. Still, though, I mutter one under my breath. 10 collapses into 9 and 8 and 7. I'm driving my arms into a sprint. When I'm on 4 and 3 and 2, I'm kneeling in the fields behind my house, narrowly escaping a blinding white beam of light trying to find me in the shadow. I kicked my heels off at some point, settling on bare feet. My breath is heavy and painful, and my stomach twists into knots as I press myself into the dirt and lay still until the light has skimmed over me, darting left and then right as if it's a sentient thing. When I risk lifting my head, I stare at the illuminated night and our town clock tower looming over us. The clock face taunts me as I resume crawling, my hand fisting into the dirt and grass, my breath thinning. In the corner of my eye, flashlights have joined the large beam of light, and then figures bleeding from every corner. I revel in the silence and keep going until I reach our hiding place. I can see familiar faces carved in the dark, and my breath starts to quicken. Just a little more. I know exactly when it will turn 10 p.m. I know when to slam my hands over my ears and when to bite my tongue and taste my blood. I can sense the clock tower awaiting my attempt to escape. It wants me to try. It wants me to drown out its singing voice in my ears. When a flashlight beam hits me, I throw myself into the grass and dirt and play dead. This time the light doesn't skim over me. It hangs over my body, burning the backs of my legs and head. It strays on me for a minute longer before there's a shout in the distance and my heart drops into my stomach. They found someone. It's probably Ben Ashcroft. He was the only one who was too slow. With the wandering light distracted, I risked it. Jumping to my feet, I used my legs to catapult myself into a sprint. The dress is too long and trails behind, and my injuries and swimming head do not help. But when I'm safe from the light and surrounded by familiar faces pressed into the dirt around me, I let out a breath and manage to breathlessly sob, bridging on hysteria. Surrounding me are the remnants of what is supposed to be a magical night. Sequin dresses and suits and flower crowns. I join the others who kneel with dirt splattering their legs and red smearing their faces. We watch one long beam of light in front of us. It grows brighter, so bright we have to shade our eyes. In the distance, I can see figures patrolling, faces I used to know and trust. We take a step back as one, some of us stumbling and staggering, with one girl pressing her hand over her mouth. I know 10 looms. It's so close, I can almost taste it. And so my hands do exactly what they always do. My fingers creeping toward my ears, and my breath starts to thin, and bile finds its way to the back of my mouth. I can't see the clock face from this angle, but I can imagine as if it already is inside my head, creeping into my brain. I see an expanse of white and a ticker creeping toward oblivion. Shoulder to shoulder, we lay in the dirt on our stomachs and wait for the end. So much for graduation. There's a figure next to me. I know her name, but I don't know her. She's almost painfully beautiful, drowned in shadow and yet illuminated by her beauty. Her arms are folded across her chest, eyes haunted. I start to agree when one of the guys yells, "Duck," and we do. I was already sensing it getting closer, and there it is. It's right above us, skimming over our attempt once again to play dead. I shove my face into the damp grass and gritted dirt which sticks to my cheeks. 1 minute to 10. I start to cover my ears as usual, and when a warm hand wraps around my wrist and yanks me to my unsteady feet, I start to scream before I recognize the silhouette in front of me. I know her touch when her arms wrap around my neck and pull me closer to her. I know the smell of her favorite perfume, but I can't see her face. Mom. Confusion blurred in my mind because it can't be my mom, right? I saw her. The words don't even make it to the forefront of my mind because I find myself uncaring. I was alone without her, without Dad, without my brother and sister already captured by the light. But now I have her. I don't have time to speak. My mother's already dragging me away from the others with breathy promises to them that she will keep me safe. I ignore the others' looks of horror, their eyes wide and parted lips attempting to speak, and follow my mom. I asked her where we were going, and she tightened her grip on my hand. When the beam of light flashes over our head, she pulls me behind a wall and then tells me to dive into the back of the car that she has parked across the road. I make it 3 steps before the bells start to ring. 10 p.m. I can hear screams out of the window, and the thick smell of smoke curls in the back of my nose and throat, choking me. It starts, and I don't have my hands over my ears. 10 perfect tolls, and each one slams into me like waves of ice water, writhing around me. I can't protect myself. Instead of panicking, I throw myself into the back seat of my mom's car, burying my head in the sweater which smelled like my brother, the cigarettes he used to hide, mixed with the stink of body odor. My hands were already sticky with sweat and glued to my ears when Mom threw open the car door and jumped inside. "Are you okay?" Her voice was barely audible through the cruel tolls ringing in my skull. I managed to nod, managing to tell her through gritted teeth that as soon as we were out of town, I would be okay. She asks me where my siblings are, and I break out into tears. I'm half aware of a flashlight finding the window I'm pressed against. I press myself into the seats that smell like my family. Like normality. I wait for my mom to take me away. When I was a kid, my mom always told me to count elephants when I was scared. So I did. I squeezed my eyes shut, tried to ignore my mother's shaky driving over the terrain she shouldn't be going over, and started to count. 1 elephant. Someone threw a rock at our car and I screamed. I didn't have hands to muffle my screech. They were already blocking out the clock tower trying to get into my head. 2 elephants. A thump caught me off guard. Muffled screaming that was too close. Another thump. This one was more violent. Someone was in the trunk of my mom's car. There's a crash behind me, but I'm too scared to lift my head. 3 elephants. Mom takes a detour. I ask her where we're going, but she says that she's taking a shortcut across town. But I know the only safe place was the field where I had left the others. The only solace we had from the light, the only from the bell tolls inside our heads, was getting further and further away. 4 elephants, and I risk lifting my head and immediately shade my eyes. The light is so powerful, drowning out the dark that felt like safety, felt like hope. Mom, the words slip from my mouth in a whimper. Sweetie, where's your sister? She was caught. You know she was caught. Mom hummed, tightening her grandpa in her wheel. She alive? I gulped down hysterical breaths. I don't know. But this isn't the way out of town. I watched the road fly by, well aware that we were heading straight for the center. My head hit the leather seat, and I squeezed my eyes shut, straight for the light. I could barely hear my own voice as the bell tolls suffocate my skull, drawing the breath from my lungs. Where are we going? By the time the words leave my mouth, there's only heavenly light seeping in through the windows, bathing me in warmth. My thoughts were cotton candy as the clock tower found what it had been searching for. It found me, staring directly into the heart of the clock face looming directly over my head. Outside I can see shadows of parents carrying their unconscious children toward the swirling, mystical light, which was growing more beautiful the longer I allowed myself to lose myself in it. Thump. Someone was in the trunk of our car. Someone was screaming in the trunk of my mother's car. 5 elephants. Mom tells me to take my hands off my ears. She says it's safe, so I do. I ask her to turn around and show me that she's not human. She does not turn around. Thump. 6 elephants. Mom parks the car directly in front of the clock tower and its wandering beam. She still does not turn around, instead telling me to get out of the car. I do. Slowly. 7 elephants. I jump out of the back seat. Not before catching the reflection of my mother in the car mirror. She tells me to ignore it, and I do. I know I can't look into the light and allow the ringing to find my mind, but Mom is my safe place. I trust her to protect me. When I step into the light, allowing the bell tolls to take me, I'm smiling. I drop down to my knees and my legs give up on me. 8 elephants. I can no longer stand up. 9 elephants. I glimpse my own fleeting reflection. 10 elephants. 10 p.m. I start to scream. Lucinda, how much sleep did you get last night? Huh? The voice cut through the both the light and whirling white noise that had taken over my mind. Lucinda? I woke up with a lump in my throat and a pit in my gut. I had no recollection of my dream except a bright light getting closer, encompassing everything around me, and the unearthly feeling of 10 p.m. I've always had an irrational fear of that particular time. The teacher's tone quickly brought me back to reality. I found my forehead uncomfortably stuck to my workbook. In the corner of my eye lay afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a shadow over my classmates. I didn't even realize I'd fallen asleep in class. I could chalk it up to a lot of things, but the main reason was my inability to sleep when I was supposed to be asleep. I could stay up all night watching TV shows and reading books, listening to my music on my iPod, and as soon as sunlight hit, my thoughts turned to mush and I suddenly wanted to sleep the whole day away, regardless of school. Not enough, was all I could reply, blinking away the dream still stirring at the back of my mind. I had a habit of forgetting dreams and nightmares. I heard someone could hold on to splinters of their dreams, but mine were gone before I could pick out anything of importance. Cal Marley was crying again. I didn't have to twist around in my chair to see. I could already hear his sniffles. It's not like I was surprised to see the kid couldn't go one class without bursting into tears, but his outbursts were starting to get frustrating. The teachers ignored him, and so did my classmates, though when he was really going for it, wailing like a baby into his desk. I couldn't resist wincing. Nobody knew why Cal cried. He'd always been like that. Though it's not like he ever had a reason to cry, triggered by something genuinely sad. Cal just cried. He sobbed all the way through classes and then lunch. I'd seen him trying to hide his face in tears on the way home from school. I can hear him behind me trying to draw in breaths, trembling in his chair. It's not like he was the weirdo of the class. Cal was actually pretty popular, aside from the incessant crying. When I turned to my seat, his head of brown curls was buried in his arms. The teacher had given up on Cal a long time ago. He was smart enough, answering questions thrown to the class when he wasn't in his weird state. So she let him cry, which was jarring. It was almost every class. I would be trying to concentrate on my work, and Cal Marley would be wailing, sobbing, screaming into his arms like a child. Initially, he was dragged out of class to calm down. These days, however, the boy was just left alone. I wondered if there was something going on at home that was triggering this lapse in mental state. It's not like he was always like this. It was like a switch had been pulled. One minute he would be talking to a friend or chewing on his pen, his gaze glued to his books. And then the next, his expression would crumble suddenly, lips carving into an O, but no sound coming out. He used to be worse. Cal would start screaming out of nowhere, clawing at his hair and mumbling gibberish to himself before being escorted out by a teacher. I don't know what they calmed him down with, but I would see him hours later acting like himself again, bumping shoulders with the crowd, his gaze glued to a dog-eared paperback he was reading. I didn't pay attention to this kid usually, but something about him that afternoon caught my eye. Luce, Mrs. Thornberry coaxed me to return to the front of the class with a frustrated hiss. And I did, not before taking notice of the drawing pad sticking from Cal Marley's backpack. Cal wasn't an artist. I had seen his attempt at drawing stick people, and even they were painfully bad. But Cal wasn't drawing. Something slimy accumulated at the back of my throat when I glimpsed his canvas. He hadn't drawn people or objects or even his surroundings. No, Cal had drawn a countdown. 10. I watched him scribble the number followed by a 9 and an 8. His shading became progressively more violent before the nib of his pencil snapped, and I turned back to face my teacher with a knot in my gut. It was lunchtime when I was dared by my group of friends to ask him what his deal was. Well, one of the girls had a thing for him, but definitely not the crying. So I was tasked with talking to him, and my prize for completing the mission was any movie at a Blockbuster. Cal was sitting alone as usual. He did have friends in the football team, though they weren't fans of his emotional breakdown. I could see the blue and gold of his Letterman jacket hanging off him, the reddish-brown of his hair held back by his glasses. Cal was pretty blind without his glasses, but he was also a fairly attractive guy, and glasses were for nerds. When I planted my cafeteria tray of mystery meats and carton of milk in front of him, he was squinting at his book, trying and failing to hide a sniffling with the sleeve of his Letterman. "Why are you always crying?" I asked, getting straight to the point. I had already rehearsed this conversation multiple times in my head, and the imaginary version of Cal had gotten way too defensive when I tried to break the ice, so I just came right out with it, my wandering gaze already searching for his sketchbook. Cal didn't respond at first, his gaze flicking to grains on the table. I leaned my chin on my fist, trying to smile. "You're always wailing," I said, a lilt to my tone. I didn't expect an emotion myself. Maybe his tangled emotions were contagious. I didn't know what it was about him, but being around Cal was like being suffocated by a tumultuous cloud. I felt it immediately, a sudden ache in my chest and a tightening in my gut. I swallowed thickly. "What's making you cry?" He lifted his gaze, lips curling into his scowl. "Leave me alone." "But there must be a reason," I said. "Is it something you can't tell me?" Something shifted in his expression, and for the first time in a long time, Cal smiled. Well, it was the start of one. I'd seen him smile before, but his smiles were always splintered and fake. But looking at him right then, really taking every part of him in, I realized my classmates' eyes were hollow. His expression was past pain and despair, past numbing agony he couldn't feel. It was nothing. What could have possibly led him to this? He was 16 years old. He used to be the brightest student in our class, and one day was hit by a depression and pain he couldn't articulate. Only in gut-wrenching sobs that must have been tearing him apart. Cal Marley was a shadow with a human face. He almost resembled an alien pretending to be human. Leaning toward me, he mimicked me, resting his chin on my fist, his gaze searching mine for something I didn't understand. I cry because I'm awake. I frowned. You cry because you're awake? Yes. Is something going on at home? You could talk to the school counselor, you know. That's what she's there for. It slid across my chocolate cupcake. You can have this. I was about to leave with my mission complete, and the boy scoffed. Do you remember what we did the night of our graduation? His words kind of took me off guard. I leaned back, folding my arms across my chest. Have you been hit on the head? We don't graduate until next year, unless you're psychic. I thought the boy was going to hurl his soda at me, but instead, he sighed and buried his head in his arms. You're not awake, so go away. Where can I find this story? It's on Reddit. Dude, I'm pretty sure I'm awake. I poked him. You're the one acting crazy. Cal lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed. I could see where he tried and failed to swipe at his cheeks and claw marks he'd made with his nails. You really think you're awake? He pulled out his iPod, flashing the tiny screen in my face. What do you see? I frowned at the distorted version of my face wobbling on the screen. I see me. He nodded. Do you see your real face? Something about his words sent shivers creeping down my spine. Suddenly it hit me, an overwhelming urge to get away from him. It was suffocating, a weight dragging me down to the depths of the ocean, plunging me into the dark. But it wasn't the dark. What should have been pooling oblivion ripping me apart was instead painful light bleeding into me, tendrils of sparking electricity slipping into my nose and my mouth. I choked on phantom fingers, pushing their way through my lips, trying to delve into my lungs. I felt my breath starting to thin, my vision blurring. Cal's face became no face at all, and then a shadow. What's that supposed to mean? Was all I could whisper, blinking through intense brain fog, beginning to choke me, strangling the words in my mouth. I've always imagined my fear like tiny bugs skittering across my arm and the back of my neck. I've always been able to slap them off me before they could creep under my flesh, burrowing into my bones. Except now, my mouth was filled with them. They were everywhere, wriggling into my nose and pulsating on my tongue. I could feel them creeping down my neck, entwined around my spine. I started to move, to get up, to get away from the boy who was drowning me in light, not dark. The light I didn't want to see. I was irrationally terrified of, deep down. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. Everything I'd always been able to do was suddenly so painfully hard. Getting to my feet and breathing, just simple breaths. My fingers felt weak around my tray when I tried to grasp hold of it. They felt so wrong, like they were detached from my hands. I felt my body aching, an internal ache I'd never felt before, and now feeling it, understanding it, I realized it had always been there. It took everything in me to speak, and even then my speech felt wrong and tangled in my mouth. I took a deep breath and exhaled. Reflections can be distorted sometimes, but I can just see my usual face. I don't know why I paused, why I felt like what I was saying wasn't real. The world seemed to be a blur around me between my words, and somehow Cal Marley became the only thing that seemed like reality. You're not awake. Cal's voice cut into my thoughts. If you were awake, you would be crying too. I get it. I don't want to see all of this either. But I'm not allowed to sleep. I have to stay awake. You're not making any sense, I gritted out. Do you want to wake up? What? 10 p.m., Cal said under his breath. Wait until 10 p.m. Go inside your bathroom and look into the mirror, and make sure to block out the clock tower. It screws with our heads. That's why we're here. Why we're stuck in a nightmare. Stuck? He nodded, picking up my iPod and dangling it in front of my eyes. You can't see it because of what they did to you, but I can. I wasn't an idiot that night. I stayed exactly where we were supposed to be, and I didn't get caught. Unlike you. You and the others were spirited away by your upside-down parents. He pulled out his sketch pad and showed me a badly drawn depiction of a group of stick people running toward what I presumed was a hill. Cal had drawn it in a wavy line, shaded it in, and it was labeled with Primrose Hill, which was directly behind my house. He turned the page, and this time he'd drawn the stick people lying, shaded scribbles labeled field. Oh boy. Cal's story was intriguing, sure, but it was the first time in a long time I'd actually seen him speaking like normal. The guy had two states. He was either uncontrollably sobbing into his desk or quiet and reserved, the smart kid in class. You sound out of your mind, I told him, reveling in the normality, easing back into the focus. So, Cal was just a nut. But I kind of dig it. Have you been reading Creepypasta? Have you heard the new one about the creepy tree man? I'm serious. Cal's expression didn't falter. You have to plug your ears and look in the mirror at exactly 10 p.m. or it won't work. So Bloody Mary. I rolled my eyes. In a way, I was relieved that it was my own mind playing tricks on me. I flicked off the last bug lingering on my lip. Also, I don't know what urban myth you're copying off of, but our town doesn't have a clock tower. Exactly. Before I could respond, he got to his feet. If you want to wake up, do exactly what I say, and I'll be in touch. If you would prefer to stay docile and brainwashed, feel free to completely forget what I told you and go back to sleeping. What's going on? My brother fell in step with me on the way to class. Maybe it was my lack of sleep, but I could have sworn his steps were odd, misplaced, and twitchy, like his feet weren't even touching the floor. Nothing. Then why the face? Noah laughed. Come on, you can tell me. We're sibs, remember? Come on, you can trust me. Noah's voice was suddenly in my head, a strangled hiss. We're sibs, remember? I shook away the voice. Don't you have anything better to do? I swiped at a maggot stuck to my arm. Nope. I caught his grin. I have a lot of free time, if you must know. Under the bleeding light of the school hallway, my brother did not have a shadow. She's beginning to believe. I went home that day with a funny taste in my mouth and a twist in my gut that wouldn't ease. Mom was at the kitchen when I dumped my bag on the table. Your teacher called. Apparently you haven't been getting enough sleep. Would you like to tell me why? She's seeing a boy, obviously. Noah. When I lifted my head, I couldn't see him, but he was lurking somewhere. When he wasn't driving me crazy at school, Noah was always in the kitchen, either sitting on the countertop with his prime intention to annoy our mother, or sitting with his feet up on the dining room table, his eyes glued to his DS. This time his face was a little clearer. I could see his mop of brown curls, the lip piercing he wasn't allowed to get, and a sly smile, hiding as usual. Noah and Lottie, my older by year brother and sister, were for some reason always lurking in the kitchen at home like ghosts, or sour milk. While Noah liked to hang around the countertop or sometimes even the stove when it wasn't on, Lottie sat cross-legged on the floor. I didn't understand why the two of them hung around the kitchen so much. I shot Noah a glare and Mom chuckled in response. Noah, don't tease your sister. Just make sure you get some sleep tonight, okay? You need to look your best for tomorrow. I nodded. In the corner of my eye, my brother's shadow bled across the wall. I caught his swinging legs, his grinning lips. Why didn't you let me out of the truck, Luce? What? Thump, thump, thump. The sound didn't feel attached to reality sitting in my kitchen, but it felt real. Thump, thump, thump. Bugs filled my mouth again. This time writhing, wriggling, and squirming across my tongue and teeth. I downed my soda, my stomach twisting with nausea. I couldn't stop thinking about Cal's words. It was just a stupid superstition, right? Mom called me down for dinner, and I swallowed my spaghetti and meatballs, ignoring the conversation between my siblings and my mother. If anything, it was more one-sided. Noah talked about his excitement for the upcoming game against Stratford, and Lottie named all her literary heroes. Mom didn't respond to either of them, only nodding with a small smile. Noah asked me several questions about school and if I was excited to graduate, but he wasn't smiling when I risked glancing at him. His gaze never strayed from me, even when he was talking to Mom. I watched him fork up pasta slowly, methodically, before stuffing it into his mouth and chewing. It was 9 p.m. when I was getting ready for bed. I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, Cal's words echoing in my skull. Stand in front of your mirror and plug your ears at exactly 10 p.m. and you will wake up. I pulled out the earplugs I grabbed from Mom's room, rolling them around between my palms. What did Cal mean by waking up? Glancing at the time, something ice-cold squirmed its way down my spine, a sudden weight in my chest. 9:45, and I hadn't realized until then I was shaking, my fingers turning white around the marble faucet. 9:46. I felt like I was going to be sick. 9:47, I was kneeling in front of the toilet shivering. Noah's words from earlier wouldn't leave my mind. I didn't let him out of the trunk. 9:48. Something clawed its way into my mouth, a scream that had been suppressed. 9:49. I heaved up my dinner, choking it of tangled spaghetti and undigested meatballs. Pressing my forehead against the toilet seat, I could see them already, writhing black dots skittering across perfect white porcelain. 9:50. I locked myself in the bathroom and hid away everything reflective I had. I stuffed all my mirrors under my bed, but still somehow I found myself standing in front of my door, my trembling hands on the door handle. 9:55. I twisted it and pulled my door open. 9:56. I stood in front of our bathroom mirror once again, but this time I could hear my brother's muffled shrieking from inside the car trunk. I could hear my sister sobbing. 9:57. Squeezing my eyes shut, I corked in earplugs. 9:58. I waited. 9:59 was when the world around me came to a standstill, and reality contorted into something else entirely. When I opened my eyes, it was pitch black. I stared toward the switch, but my body was suddenly heavy and wrong, and I had to drag myself to the wall. I reached up and felt for the switch, clicking it on. 10 p.m. Somehow the world was brighter, like I had been living, drowning in black and white. Reality slammed into me like a wave of ice water. I was running. I was running for my life, and I was with Mom. I was with Mom, and what happened? April 3rd, 2013. I escaped my psycho town, but I didn't. I was still here. Reality and dreams started to blur together in my head, and suddenly time didn't make sense. 2013. I let out a choked breath, turning back to my reflection in the mirror, but instead of my own face was a wrinkled old woman with eyes that were wide like mine, lips parted into an O. Just like mine. I stumbled back, my shaking hands coming up to stroke my own face, where I felt the folds of my skin, endless stretches of wrinkles lining my forehead and face. The woman's eyes were hollow, ancient. This wasn't even old, it was drained. Monstrous. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember staggering out of the bathroom, and in the distance I could hear them. Bells. The timing of that loud boom outside was perfect. That scared me. My gosh. And the more I registered them, the more I let them bleed into my brain. My ancient hands blurred back to what I'd always known, my manicured 17-year-old fingers. I started toward my room. My thoughts were whirring. I could still hear the bells clanging in my skull. But it wasn't 2013. I could feel it, sense it in the years which had passed me by. Not enough to turn me ancient, but enough to significantly age me. Mom? My voice was a sharp squeak, which felt like mine, but more adult. While my body was thick and weak, it felt like I was paralyzed in a suit of flesh that was not mine. The stairs I thought I always knew were different. The carpet was rugged and wrong, coated in dust. The living room was lost in time, a coat of dust hanging in the air. As I strode down the hallway, the lights blinked out one by one, making way for the orange glow of candlelight lighting up the pooling oblivion I found myself walking into. There was a shadow in Mom's place at the table, still drinking wine. In the blur of orange candlelight, I couldn't make out a face, but then my gaze was drinking into our kitchen. and I stepped back, my heart diving into my throat. The first thing I saw was splattered red across the walls, bugs crawling across the red, feasting on the entrails, sticking to the massacre on the wall. Then I found the headless bodies of my brother and sister on the ground, their torsos bowed in prayer to a mirror that hung from worn paintwork, while their heads hung from the wall, like decorations. Maggots filled Noah's dead, grinning mouth, popping from the crevices in his eyes. Something about the bodies turned my gut. They'd been dead for so long, and yet somehow they were still intact. Lottie's curls were still being brushed out and pulled into pigtails. Noah's unruly curls tamed to perfection. "What is it, sweetie?" The shadow's voice was not familiar. When it turned around to face me, I saw only intense beauty, enough to steal away my breath. The woman's features were perfect, not a flaw in sight, shining dark hair, haloing a heart-shaped face. I took another step back. Her slender hands was small with my brother's hair. When she pulled its arm, there was movement in front of me. Noah was sitting in the countertop once more, waving cheerily. A smile spread out across his lips. Unlike earlier, though, it was strained. His cavernous eyes were dark, reflected with orange light, and if I squinted, I could see where our mother had pierced his skull, running it through his head. Mom did the same with another doll, this time dipping it into a wooden bowl in front of her, dyeing its tiny face in scarlet. Lottie, still sitting on the floor, coughed up a fountain of streaked red, and her body on the ground jolted, the floor itself rumbling before going still. This thing was not my mother. I watched my mother die at my graduation party 11 years ago. I watched my upside-down mother murder my siblings in a twisted memory I refused to see clearly. Well, the monster turned to me, and I could hear its neck snapping, its bones moving with every twitchy movement. She gripped the Noah doll's head between her nails, and in turn my brother's head snapped back with a disgusting, sickening snap. Their eyes found mine, and they were cruel mimic of Mom's, the exact eyes that had bewitched me so long ago. "Lucinda, what is it?" She cocked her head, and my siblings copied her, almost mockingly, their smiles hers. Their eyes. Hers. Instead of answering her, I turned around and forced my legs back upstairs. I was 28 years old. The realization wasn't sinking in yet, though something didn't make sense. 28-year-olds did not look like this. I wasn't 17 anymore. My life up until now had been a never-ending high school Groundhog Day. "Why didn't you pull me out of the trunk?" When I twisted around, my 18-year-old brother was leaning against the door, and when I took notice, his clothes were dated. High tops and skinny jeans. While I had been aged way beyond my years, Noah was eternally 18. I don't know why I felt envious of him in that moment, embarrassed of my real face. I don't know. I can't remember. Noah sighed. Well, I'd hurry up remembering because Mom isn't finished with us yet. Wait. What? I'm not allowed to talk to you. She's not controlling you? I whispered. She lets me wander sometimes. What has she done to us? You tell me. You're the favorite sibling, the one she chose to keep. It's obvious what she did to us. Shh. Lottie's hiss came from behind me. We're not allowed to talk to her. I twisted to see my sister, but she was gone. Something hit my window, pulling me out of my thoughts. I wandered over to the window, still dazed, seeing my siblings' corpses at the back of my eyes. When I peered outside, there was a silhouette standing under the street light outside my house. When I stepped out of the shadow, I found myself staring at an ancient man frowning up at me, his arms folded across his chest. His eyes matched mine, hollowed out and tired, drained of something precious to us 11 years ago. Cal. In the distance, a blinding beam of light scoured our town. I found myself stumbling away from it, ducking when it illuminated my window. I counted 10 elephants before risking a peek, and Cal was still there. He didn't say anything, only shooting me I told you so look. I reached up to jostle the earplugs, dislodging them for a moment, and heard the faded ringing of bells. while the old man in front of me contorted into a 17-year-old looking boy once again, before disappearing into the dark. I've been sitting here for a long time trying to figure out what I am and what my fake mother is. Why am I being forced to relive the year 2013 while the rest of the world resides in the present? I need your help. I'm trapped inside this house, inside this town I tried to escape 11 years ago. What has my upside-down mother done to me? And how can I get out? That's the end of that story. That was way longer than I anticipated. Ooh, read some comments. Pretend like everything's still normal, but please do some snooping and eavesdropping at school, where it'll be marginally safer. If Cal is able to traverse this somehow, he's the key to learning more and figuring out what to do. Maybe if enough of you can wake up, you can figure out a way to break the cycle or get away. One thing's for sure, the clock tower is the source. Either it has to go, or you have to get away from it, far enough away from the light that the light can't reach. I'm going to see if I can find a short one really fast to end this. Oh, this one's kind of short, I think. Yeah, we'll do this one real quick. My friend hasn't spoken in days. I wish I never found out why. By Skinny Tinkles, a day ago. I live in a pretty rural area. Takes over a little over an hour to drive to the nearest town, but I'm not completely isolated. My good friend Rob and his wife Irina are a 10-minute walk from my house, and our friend Anton owns a farm that's a 25-minute walk down the road. I was talking with Anton at my house last night when Irina knocked on the door. She looked like she hadn't gotten much sleep in a while. Is everything okay? We asked her near simultaneously. Robbie's not well, I think. He hasn't talked since he fell. I'm really worried about him. Robbie fell? When? Let me start again. 2 days ago, Robbie told me he was going hunting with Ivan, so I took a nap on the couch. Ivan, our dog, woke me up by barking at me. I also heard gunshots in the woods. I followed Ivan outside, and he took me to a pit just as Robbie climbed out. He looked out of it. He was very pale, so I nearly had to drag him home, but he wouldn't tell me a thing about what happened. He just stared blankly at me. And he hasn't talked since? Anton asked. No, he hasn't even eaten around me, but half the fridge was empty this morning, and I doubt it was Ivan. Let's go see him. Maybe he'll be more talkative with some friends around. So we walked to his house, and he was sitting at the table exactly as Irina had described, staring blankly ahead, pale as a ghost. What's the matter, Rob? Irina says, You haven't been talking much lately? I asked carefully. Are you giving her the silent treatment to get on her nerves? Anton joked. Apparently you haven't eaten in a while now. That'd be a first. Anton laughed and slapped Rob on the back when suddenly Rob leaned forward and started to retch. Oh, crap. You right there, Rob? Rob hacked out a large red bug onto the kitchen table. Then a dozen smaller bugs crawled out of his mouth and down his face before suddenly he vomited a torrent of writhing red insects across his kitchen. Anton and I started yelling and stomping any bug that got close while Irina stood in horrified silence. A horde of smaller bugs began amassing directly in front of me, but I grabbed the kettle and emptied its contents of the squirming mass. By now the vomiting had stopped and Rob had fallen backwards out of the chair, his eyes rolled back into his head. The smaller bugs scuttled out of the doors and windows, and all the larger ones had been stomped into a maroon pulp. What was that? Whispered Anton. Only way to find out. Sorry to ask you, Irina, but can you lead us to the pit you found Rob climbing out of? Once we got there, I shone a flashlight in and saw a few animal bones. After a few minutes, a sickly-looking rabbit with patches of fur missing hopped toward the pit. As soon as it fell in, more of these red bugs swarmed out of its mouth and deeper into the cave. Irina flinched at the sight of this. Irina, go home and call someone to tell them Rob's dead. Anton and I will deal with this. Anton and I went to his house and gathered what we needed, gasoline, and a lot of it. Once we returned, we drenched the bottom of the pit with it and threw a match in. It lit up immediately, and it was hugely cathartic to see those bugs go up in flames after what happened to poor Rob. Anton managed to craft some kind of improvised explosive and sealed off the pit afterwards. We drove to town after that. Anton's trying to explain that Rob died in some sort of hunting accident, while I dropped Irina at her sister's house in town. The poor woman, having that happen to her husband. She must have been traumatized because she hasn't spoken since last night. That's the end of that. Reading comments. Friend, Irina's gone already. Please make sure she doesn't end up being patient. 0.5. Out of left field alternative interpretation. Rob died of an aneurysm, and those kindly red bugs were nice enough to pilot his body back home so he could have a proper funeral. Trying to find. The stupid lanternflies are everywhere. We knew they were an invasive species, but who knew they were that insane? That's the end of that. Well, we are gonna switch over to just chatting and change our music. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's stream. I'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard for some Minecraft. See you guys then. And we're gonna see if there's any friends we can rate today. And while I'm doing that, if you're watching on YouTube and you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. It takes 2 seconds and it's completely free, so you can always unsubscribe later. None of our friends are streaming today, so we are just gonna end. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye.